Watch this.
The memo written to U of I employees trying to explain the guidelines to avoid an abortion-related felony continues to be layered. There's one health center on campus, and it's run by non-state employees, so do these guidelines guide them? It's part of every good rivalry, the trash talk. So ahead of tomorrow's Boise State game against San Diego State, a Bronco and an Aztec, now teammates, try to pump up their alma mater. They were the buzz of the town back in 2016, giving a caffeine boost to trailgoers. So where are they now? We checked in with the man and mule duo on this National Coffee Day. You know, there's an often used outlook on life that if you don't like your situation, change it. And if you can't, well, change your attitude. And I know that's a butchered version of the Maya Angelou quote, but as an added amendment to that quote, if you can't change your situation, change your location. And we've seen a lot of that mentality the last couple of years when it comes to COVID and, of course, masks, and now with Idaho and abortion laws. We know a lot of people are already traveling outside the Gem State for abortion accessibility. But does it stop there? A recent letter from the University of Idaho says no U of I staff can promote services for abortion or even contraceptives for the purpose of preventing a pregnancy. And that's while they're on the job, of course, not at any time on their own. But it's a good time to bring in Andrew Bartline here to kind of explain this a little bit, because we were talking about this and you've been searching all day looking for answers on how this might apply going through this week. How will this impact Idahoans and students at the University of Idaho? You can't talk about abortion, can't suggest abortion, and we're not even going to offer contraceptives.
Yeah, and it's important to know that the laws didn't exactly change. It's how the University of Idaho is interpreting these laws and, of course, advising their staff how to handle that. So first and foremost, we'll get that out of the way off the top, interpretation of the laws. And it starts with the No Public Funds for Abortion Act that was passed in 2021. It says no public dollars can promote, fund, or refer somebody to go get an abortion. The letter also says to university staff they should not advertise or promote services for the prevention of conception. That's just a fancy way of saying don't provide access to birth control. Now, the university arrives at that conclusion based on an unclear wording in State Code 18603. Brian touched on that earlier this week. In that code, it says other than a licensed physician, it's illegal to provide the prevention of conception. So the University of Idaho is advising staff to be cautious and be conservative based on their own interpretation to avoid any legal trouble. They warn staff breaking these rules could be a felony. So what does this impact? The first thing you'll probably think about is the health clinic on the campus at U of I, the Vandal Health Clinic. It provides different forms of contraceptives, but they say that they will not change even after this letter. Gritman Medical Center is contracted by the university to run that clinic. Gritman released a statement reading in part, "The methods in which we provide health care services to students and others at our Vandal Health Clinic will continue to comply with all state and federal laws and will not change as a result of the memo sent out recently by the University of Idaho's leadership." According to Gritman's statement, it does appear the law does either not apply to them because they're independently contracted after all, or at the very least, Gritman is choosing to interpret the language of these laws differently for themselves. Gritman will continue to offer their regular services at that Vandal Health Clinic. As for university staff, the letter warns about remaining neutral in classroom discussions about abortion and forms of contraceptives. Interestingly enough, the letter says staff can refer students to people and sources outside the university. On page 6 of that letter, it says, quote, directing students to private groups or agencies of another state where students can receive a discussion of all aspects of the topic and be presented with all alternatives legally available to them is not barred. However, in doing so, university employees must remain neutral on the subject of abortion and simply reference the ability of the outside sources to have a broader discussion of all aspects of the topic. But it appears that many people have already found these sources themselves, most namely at Planned Parenthood in Pullman, Washington. It's around 7 miles from Moscow.
A steady increase in patients from Idaho at the Pullman Clinic, especially this summer, where from July to August, we saw about a 62% up to 78% patient increase, and that has continued to rise over the last year.
Now, that timeline, Brian, is probably not a coincidence, talking about June and July when Roe was struck down. So whether people needed to or not, because it took time for the trigger laws in Idaho to kick in, people, of course, that gut reaction going out of state for whatever resources they would want to get. But it seems that at this health clinic on campus, though, it's kind of the same thing, where right now it seems like it's fine, nothing's going to change.
Well, what's interesting, 62 to 78% of what number we don't know. I mean, that could be, of 5% or of 10 people that showed up, so it could be a small number there. The other thing, you said it was a fancy way of saying birth control, this prevention of conception. It's also an 1887 way of saying no birth control, because that law is word for word from 1972. It was also from 1887. The other thing I wanted to ask you about, or just kind of point out, so we've been talking about how, when you hear the headlines say, University of Idaho will not be providing birth control to students. And so basically what we found out is, well, unless professors were handing it out themselves, it's coming from the health center, which was providing that and will continue to do so.
Yeah, I mean, the headline will say one thing based on this letter and warning their staff, but the people who run that clinic are independently contracted, and nothing is really going to change at that clinic, according to what we've heard so far from them.
Okay, good way to clear that up. All right, thank you very much, Andrew. We've also talked this week about how U of I's guidelines on this are a bit more strict than Boise State's interpretations. BSU Health Services will also not offer emergency contraception on campus, but they will still provide contraception to students. They aren't the only public university in Idaho, though, where the 2021 No Public Funds for Abortion Act would apply. And Diane brings up a good question. What is Idaho State University's interpretation on offering contraception? Well, Idaho State University is the four-year public university in Pocatello. So like U of I and Boise State, they do have to follow the Idaho law, which is exactly what they told us today when we reached out. They say Idaho law prevents them, just like BSU and U of I, from counseling, referring, prescribing, dispensing emergency contraception. But regular contraception, well, they say that's still okay. They told us they do not interpret the law as preventing their on-campus health center from providing birth control to patients. They say other family planning services are also available. Well, since Boise Police Chief Ryan Lee was asked to resign about a week ago, we've gotten several questions about what happens next. Well, here's what we do know. We do know he's on leave until his last official day on the force, which is October 14th. We know Ron Weininger took the reins of the department on Tuesday as the interim chief once again, and he will stay there until they can find a replacement. One person we haven't heard from, though, is Boise Mayor Lauren McLean. We did try to reach out and see if she'd be available for an interview to kind of answer some of these questions that we've had. We were told she was out of town. We have had a couple of questions sent in from you about what happens next for Chief Lee, like this one. With Chief Lee resigning, does this allow Chief Lee to retire with his full pension? As opposed to if Chief Lee was fired, he would not retain that full pension. I find it concerning, very concerning, that an officer within the BPD has been allowed to retire with full pension rather than face disciplinary action. A pension, or what the state of Idaho calls PERSI. And to be clear, Chief Lee was only there for 2 years, so full retirement, that's where we kind of get into this explanation. The Public Employee Retirement System of Idaho, known as PERSI. In order to draw from that, though, you have to meet certain requirements, including working for the state for at least 5 years. So that 2-year limit doesn't quite apply, but there are some exceptions. An elected official, or in some cases, an appointed official, which Chief Lee was, then it's only 5 months that you have to work there. So we reached out to PERSI, kind of clarify this a little bit as well, because we want to know if Chief Lee falls under that category, because he was appointed by an elected official, but not a state elected official, a city elected official. They wouldn't give us specifics, but they did give us some generalities under Idaho code, which says at the time of his separation from service, if he held office to which he had been elected by popular vote or having a term fixed by the Constitution, you can see that statute or charter, again, has to be appointed by an elected official, the head of a department, a director of a department, division, agency, statutory section, or the bureau of the state. So, PERSI says if members fall under any of those categories, they are eligible for immediate vesting. However, because, well, they can't provide the specifics about Chief Lee, it's not clear if this would apply to him. And to answer the second part of that question, as far as disciplinary action, no charges have been filed against Chief Lee, former Chief Lee, but that doesn't mean they can't be in the future. One of the 10 ways to take back our country, to fix our broken culture, according to the newest member of the Eagle Library Board, is to join a local library board. As we talked about yesterday, Brian Allman, a self-proclaimed descendant of American pioneers, an ultra-conservative blogger and contributor to the Idaho Freedom Foundation, was appointed Tuesday night by a unanimous vote of the Eagle City Council. And according to his writings, Allman claims libraries have been captured by left-wing activists who see themselves as woke missionaries in a pagan land, end quote. Yet he offers no evidence of that other than suggesting a few books he finds offensive on library shelves. The mayor, Jason Pierce, who made the appointment, explained how he narrowed down his decision to Aumann.
As far as the library board, it was the library director, it was the chairman of the library board, and then it was our liaison, Councilmember Gundersberger, and myself that were interviewed. I believe we interviewed 6 different people out of the folks that, was it 7? 7 out, and chose 3 out of the 7 to represent the library board.
And then they unanimously chose Aumann. We've been trying to ask the mayor about this appointment several times this week, and our contacts went unanswered until, well, this morning. Mayor Pierce declined our invitation for an on-camera interview, but he did offer this response as to why he settled on someone who believes librarians stock their shelves with propaganda designed to push our society to the left. Mr. Aumann and his family are frequent users of the library, Mayor Pierce said, and I believe he will bring a thoughtful and balanced perspective to the board. Balanced was the question we're going to have him explain because, again, using his own words, Aumann says library boards should be composed of solid conservatives who believed in America's traditional Christian values rather than weak-willed quislings or worse, Marxist activists promoting divisive racial politics and sexual degeneracy. Saying he didn't have time to speak with us this week, we didn't get a chance to ask Mayor Pierce, what about that sounds balanced? You know, the 208, not usually where you go for your sports content. But trust us, we're not really talking sports after the break. We are talking trash, though. Former rivals turned teammates, watching their former college teams battle on the blue. You know, the trash talking isn't just left to the professionals. You can send us some of your best right now. We love getting your messages, no matter if they're trashy or otherwise. Here's our number, 208-321-5614. Be sure to include your name and the hashtag the 208. Oh, and keep them short so we can share as many as we can at the end of the show. All right, our apologies to viewer Tim Tanton, who last month lamented the 208 was being preempted because of, quote, stupid football. But tomorrow we are being preempted again because of stupid football. The Bronco Roundup Game Day show is taking the whole hour between 5 and 6 in the run-up to the Boise State-San Diego State game at Albertson Stadium. Setting aside the fact neither Boise nor San Diego are actual states, which is common trash talk take for any fan of any Boise State opponent, the Atlanta Falcons shared Bronco-Aztec trash talk sesh of their own today. And so why do we care about the 404 in the 208? Well, because that's where former Bronco running back Avery Williams and his teammate, former Aztec defensive back Darren Hall, are getting ready for their game against the Cleveland Browns. But they did take some time out to talk about their alma maters, starting with Avery being asked, why is Boise State better than San Diego State?
First, you can start off with the city, the people. I doubt you can just walk into San Diego and people just gonna say, hi, how's your day, stop you, ask how you doing. You go to Boise, you get that. You don't get, no way you get that in San Diego. He don't even go there. So I've been back every offseason.
I've been back
a few
to San Diego
times.
so much, but I love it. You're next to the beach, great weather. What the second most applied to school, public school.
Yeah, we might have to fact check that.
Yeah, we might have to fact check that. In fact, let's do fact check that. Is San Diego State the second most applied to public school in the country? Sorry, Darren. Nope, it's not. Now, you went to San Diego State University, not UC San Diego, which is the second most applied to public school in the country. The Tritons are behind UCLA, but ahead of Cal and UC Irvine and UC Santa Barbara. San Diego State, though, according to U.S. News and World Report's 2020 rankings, not even in the top 10. I mean, UC San Diego is just a stone's throw away from the Pacific Ocean, so you can see why a lot of people would try to go there, right? San Diego State, though, about a 20-minute drive inland to the 805 to the 8. Yeah, you get there. But Avery and Darren, well, they weren't done.
Look at him.
If you want to win,
They don't win.
If you want to win,
The last time San Diego State and Boise played, the last 2 times. Okay.
yeah.
You're right.
Okay.
He's right.
Okay.
Ask him how many rings. Ask him how many rings he has. Ask him how many championships he's played in. Ask me how many times he's watched me play in a championship. All 4 of his years.
I mean, that stone face from Darren right there, right? Yeah. But Darren is right about one thing. The Aztecs do have a head-to-head lead, 4 wins to the Broncos 3. And the last time Boise State beat the Aztecs, that was back in 2017. Darren's first on the field for the Aztecs. But Avery does have those 2 Mountain West championship rings to Darren's 0, both coming, or one of them coming in 2017, the other one in 2019. And yeah, Darren did have to watch Avery win those on television because, well, San Diego didn't make it to the title game those years. By the way, Avery picked the Broncos to win tomorrow night 16-7. Darren says it'll be the Aztecs 17-13. Well, Boise State's going to try to even the overall record tomorrow night at 6 p.m. in what those former opponents turned teammates say will be a close one on the blue.
I'm going with the Broncos.
Fight till victory. Fight on and on. The Aztec man.
Go Orange. Go Big Blue. Fight. BSU.
Boo! Hey.
Blue 42.
Some of us celebrate this national holiday every day, sometimes multiple times a day, because sometimes it's the only way to get through the day, which is why when we found out a mule was delivering coffee in the foothills, we had to get the story. Coffee or another 5 o'clock hour beverage, doesn't matter. Grab your phone and send us a text, or you can leave us a voicemail. The number is the same, 208-321-5614. Don't forget your name and the hashtag the 208. You know, there's only 365 days in a year, but there seems to be triple that amount when it comes to national days. You know, you have National Kick Butt Day. That's coming up on October 10th, by the way. National Send a Card to a Friend Day. That's coming up on February 7th. And I know some of them are a bit excessive. There are some that are definitely worthy of having their own day of recognition. Like today, National Coffee Day. Some of us start out with 1 or 4 cups in a day. In 2016, we ran into a man and his mule, or should I say mule, up in the Boise foothills, making sure early morning trailblazers get an extra boost of that caffeine.
It's a scene out of the American West.
Come on. Come on.
And for Matt Bishop and his mule Richard, this is their American dream.
I just love what comes about from it. I mean, it's extremely positive.
Every Saturday, you can find him walking the Boise foothills with Richard, providing those who recreate up here that little extra shot of motivation.
Being a parent with a younger kid and a couple others in the house, I was always tired. I said, man, this would be great to have a cup of coffee up here.
So this former Green Beret officer started Cafe Mule,
I put an accent over both E's, make it fancy.
a trailside service providing a pour-over coffee to all those who pass by.
It's an awesome feeling when somebody rides up and, I say, hey, you want a cup of coffee? I'll get the, oh, I don't have a wallet, I don't have money. And I get to say it's on the house. And I joke that it's on the mule.
A mule, that's the engine behind the business, hauling close to 200 pounds every Saturday.
Some people say that they're stubborn, but it's a matter of intelligence. And my father's a very intelligent guy, and his nickname was Mule growing up. So, I thought that if I was going to have a mule, I should name him after my father.
Although it wasn't always that fancy. When Matt first started the business, he ran into some trouble with permits. But a U.S. Forest Service loophole allowed him to pursue his dream with 2 conditions. He couldn't charge and was limited on the number of people he could serve.
Less than 75 is to keep under a group permit requirement for the Forest Service. So I was capping myself at 73 people served, with me serving would be 74.
Today, Matt operates Cafe Mule on private land, which alleviates the thought of permits. But don't worry, the coffee is still free. His business runs off donations only.
For me, I thought something else that kind of fit the character of Boise and where we live was to do it on a pack mule.
Okay, so that was back in 2016. Where are Matt and Richard now? We caught up with them this afternoon at their roasting company, which he and his business partner opened in 2018.
We still go up on the trails and serve coffee. In fact, in August, we did a community trail service. We love doing it. At this point, it's a bit of a team building exercise for our crew here. We don't do it near as frequently as we used to, but we're looking for other ways to be engaged with the community. We do this thing called Richard eggs. Richard's the name of our mule, but we'll hide little prizes, so bags of coffee or mugs, and give a grid coordinate around the foothills as well as an additional way to have an activity and a presence up there. Richard's great. He still loves to get out and adventure. He just maybe doesn't carry quite as much weight as he used to, but yeah, he's doing great.
Richard's doing great. By the way, Cafe Mule's tagline, approachable people, approachable coffee, and a slightly stubborn mule. But Richard's great. And get this, for every bag of coffee they sell, they donate 25 cents back to local trail systems to help with their upkeep. All right, just a reminder, we are not on tomorrow because of the Bronco Roundup Game Day show right before the San Diego State-Boise State game. But let's get to your comments here from today. Jody wants us to double-check our facts about Percy. I don't believe former Chief Lee is fully vested, which would impact the amount he receives. But I'm not going to read the rest of that because we got an answer right as we were talking about that story in the middle of the show from the Percy people at Percy. And one of the exemptions was this fixed term that they would apply and get that. But apparently, bottom line, city police chiefs don't have fixed terms and therefore don't get immediate vesting into Percy. So no, Chief Lee apparently will not get any vested interest in his Percy retirement. Sounds like Eagle and Mr. Amon are on the right track, says Mike in council. Meanwhile, Mayor Pierce is out of line. Not all of Eagle residents conform to the Christian ultra-conservative doctrines. A centrist appointment would have served the community better with a more balanced approach, says Marty. Not everyone in Idaho is a Christian. Idahoans are supposed to be freedom-loving people, right? Says B&B. And this one, more stories about Idaho's war on women with reproductive health care. It makes me so angry. The only nice thing I can say is that I really, really like your sport coat, Brian, says Pat. Thank you. See, sometimes you got to look at the bright side.